I don't remember if there was a TV show or a book or what, but the park is what I remember. I never went to it, not really, but I remember hearing Mom talk about it a lot. It was called Fenders Grotto, and she said that when she was a kid, it was just about the best place on earth. Dr. Winter's pen stopped mid-scratch. Fenders Grotto. Why did that sound so familiar? Had one of her other patients said something about it once? She didn't know, but it was possible that one of her poor broken lambs had bleated something about it as she took them to the paddock where they'd be safe. It sounds as if it's a place that is no longer open, so how is it that you came to be there? The girl in her early 20s, not yet old enough to dull such things with alcohol and time, so she had come to someone she trusted for help. She had come to Pamela Winters. Well, we weren't supposed to be there, she admitted, her eyes fogging over as she lay back and slipped into her memories. But Fenders Grotto was just too cool to pass up. It was in a little inlet, a stretch of beach that butted up to the ocean. It was full of water now, but when the tide went out, it was a magical place. Fenders Grotto had once been a large theme park, a place of wonder and mystery. Mom had some pictures of it, and it looked like the park basically had 4 parts. A forest area made of big trees that were like a play place full of slides and ball pits and things. A giant mountain with a face that spoke sometimes. It had a roller coaster inside of it. A fair that was supposed to be some kind of country fair with rides. And a beach near the dam that kept the water out, which was a water park with pools and wave pools and such. Mom said it was the greatest place ever, but it wasn't to last. The show started to lose popularity, the toys and merchandise weren't selling, and attendance at the park went way down. The park tried desperately to remain relevant. They got roving mascots, they added more rides to the fair area, they held shows and special events, but it wasn't meant to be. The park closed its gates in 1985, but they weren't sure what to do with the park after that. It sat there, slowly falling into disrepair, and Mom said that she and some of her friends would sneak in to explore and stuff sometimes. There was talk that the park would begin selling some of the rides off, but it seemed like they were hoping that it would bounce back and they could open again. A hurricane that sprang up in '91 took the decision away from them. It broke the dam that regulated the water for the fake beach and flooded the park. The dam had been in disrepair since the park closed, but the added pressure had caused it to burst, flooding the grotto and placing the park underwater. It was a total loss, nothing salvageable, and the park and the grotto were abandoned, left to a watery grave. And every night at 9:45, as the tide ebbs, the park comes back into view for 3 or 4 hours before the tide rushes back in after midnight and floods the park again. I had rolled my eyes when Candace told me, flicking the butt of my cigarette at her. Yeah, right, Candace. Sounds like one of those internet stories to me. No, Candace insisted. It's real. I've seen it. I read about it online, and the other night I biked out there to see if it was true, and it's legit. The whole park is uncovered. I looked over at Matt, but he just shrugged. Wasn't like we had anything better to do. There's only a couple of days left till Halloween, so why not have a little adventure? I couldn't argue with that, and we decided to go check it out. There were 4 of us. Candace was our resident internet explorer, Matt and I were heavy into scene kid stuff, and Emma was our token goth girl. Together, we formed a weird square of high school oddness, and the other kids were more than happy to let us know about it. We didn't get invited to social gatherings, we weren't on the guest list for parties, and we had no interest in sports. We generally ended up hanging out together, and sometimes that led us to explore strange places. Graveyards, abandoned buildings, older parts of town that might be haunted, and now, Fenders Grotto. It was October, the spooky month, and a little exploration seemed in order. We all told our parents that we were spending the night at Emma's house on Halloween, like we usually did. Emma's parents were old, like nearly 60, and they had been hippies back before she was born. They were constantly going out of town for concerts or festivals, and Emma usually was left on her own. We helped her fill that void by staying over, though we didn't usually tell our parents there were no adults there. So, at about 8, just as the street lights were coming on and the kiddos were heading home, we set out for the spot. Hanging a left on Bulwark, we headed for the little-used South Beach area. There had been a bonfire on the beach that night, and as many of the participants left for home, we rode towards the spot where Candace said the grotto was. "Hey, your mom's been there before, right?" Candace asked, and when I nodded, she smiled, showing her braces. "Did she tell you about it?" She said in its own way it was better than Disneyland. She had watched the show on TV as a kid, so she liked being able to see all her favorite characters. She always liked this character that moved by playing hopscotch. Like, I think that was even the character's name. She's got a picture with her somewhere at home, this green puppet thing with pigtails and googly eyes. She really liked the place. I think sometimes she wished she could go back. Matt was nodding. My mom watched it too. She liked Corfin, the big blue one. She used to have a stuffed animal of him, but I think she sold it. I haven't seen it on her bed lately, and when I asked, she said it must have gotten lost. I looked it up online, though, and the ones in good condition go for thousands. I guess the merchandise has gotten a little rare. My mom never talks about it, Candace said. Mine either, Emma chimed in. Well, Matt's mom and my mom grew up in Santa Cairn. I think the show was mostly a local phenomenon. I know a lot of kids in California were wild about it, but Disney kind of put a nail in its coffin after the 80s. Both your parents weren't born here, so maybe they hadn't heard of it. We were thinking about that, me trying to figure out how they had justified building a theme park for a show that was only really popular in California, when we came to a hill where Candace said she could see the park. "See?" she said, dropping her bike and pointing to the spot below. "I told you it was here." We all set our bikes down and came to the hill to find that, sure enough, there was a whole theme park down there. "Wow," I breathed, realizing Mom had been right. "It's beautiful." Calling the place a theme park might have been a little too grand. The park was smaller than Disneyland, about half the size, in fact, but it was weird to think that all of this had just been down here my whole life, and I'd never known about it. I knew Fenders Grotto was something the locals wanted to sweep under the rug for some reason, but why not destroy the place if you were so worried about people remembering it? Maybe they thought the ocean would do it for them. Maybe they thought it would be best not to bring attention to it, but now I think they might have had some inkling about what was going on in the place. I think they were afraid of it and wanted to pretend it didn't exist. Out of sight, out of mind, as the saying goes. "How long did you say we had before the tide comes back in?" I asked, feeling the itch to explore. "About 3 hours and change," Candace said, smiling as she noticed my excitement. "Then, let's get started," I said, half running down the hill as my friends followed behind me. Walking through the old ticket booth to get in was like a scene in Spirited Away, the one where they walk through the seemingly abandoned town. It was all bloated with seawater, barnacles, and shells spattering the outside. Everything had a heavy aroma of salt water. It was in surprisingly good shape for the amount of time it had spent underwater, but we still tried to be careful what we touched. The metal was spotted with rust, some of it eaten through entirely, and as we came into the main street of the grotto, I saw dead fish and things lying across the street and on some of the accent pieces. "So where to?" I asked. "Left will take us to the forest area, and right will take us to the fair area." I looked at my friends, but they all seemed to be staring at the mountain that lay across the park. When the tide was in, I imagined that the top of the mountain looked like a little island as it poked out above the water. The park had been built into a little dip, the park sitting well below the waterline by a wide margin. and the mountain that looked over them looked absolutely massive. The one glaring eye on the left side of the mountain didn't help much, and the gaping mouth that now hung perpetually open was extremely off-putting. I couldn't imagine being here when this thing was talking, the giant eyes moving and the mouth opening and closing. I think, even as a teen, it would have scared the hell out of me. "Let's head to the forest area," Candace said, going left as the others fell in behind her. As we walked, I heard the shutter of Emma's camera. Emma was a shutterbug, had been since middle school, and she didn't travel anywhere without her Nikon. She had a digital camera. They were just starting to get really popular when I was in high school, but she preferred something with real film. Her parents had set her up a studio in the basement, a sorry present for forgetting her birthday a few years ago, and it was pretty much where she lived sometimes after shooting a bunch of pictures. She liked to experiment with different kinds of film development methods, and some of them were pretty impressive. We had just entered the towering trees. Some of them rusted through with time, but others were still standing proud, when Emma came up behind me and tapped my shoulder. "Something's following us," she whispered. Emma wasn't someone who said a lot, and when she did speak, it seemed special somehow. Matt and I turned, Candace stopping a few feet away after she realized that we had stopped, and we looked into the gloom and the shell of the main street. At first, none of us saw anything, but it was hard to miss the shadow that shifted back into the storefront. It was large, a bulbous thing with grotesque dimensions, and it was hard not to see it. We stood for a moment, not daring to move, before I shook my head and suggested we move further in. If it's just someone exploring, then maybe they'll leave us alone. If it was a cop or some security guard, then they could have already called out, and we'd have known that they were trying to kick us out. The fact that they're trying to stay hidden means that they don't know who we are either, so maybe we can just avoid each other. We proceeded under the towering trees, but I think more than one of us felt eyes watching us go. The trees had once been connected with slides and rope bridges, but most of those had either broken off or rotted away. I was sure it was an impressive spot when it was new, the rope bridges and the long slides leading into rope courses and the whole thing leading to the ball pit and bouncy nested areas. But at night, with all the netting rotting away and the broken bits of slide hanging around, it was extremely creepy. "Look," Candace half whispered, and I turned to find a lumpy-looking house that appeared to be slumped at the center of the plastic forest. What's more, I recognized it. That's the house in my mom's picture," I said, walking faster. "The one she got the picture of hopscotch in front of." Sure enough, there was a faded hopscotch board painted on the concrete in front of the lumpy-looking house. There was a placard near the door, but it was hard to read. All I could make out was Mama's house from it, and the rest was just random letters wrought in bronze. "Hey, Emma, get a picture of us here so I can show my mom. She'll never..." But I turned back and found that Emma was gone. "Emma," I called, Matt calling her name, and Candace and I went to look around. "Emma," I yelled, starting to get worried, but it was in vain. Emma was just gone. "So your friend was just gone?" The girl nodded dreamily. "Yeah, she just vanished. One minute she was there, and then, poof, she was gone." Dr. Winters tapped her pen on the page of her notepad, thinking about her client's story. It had all the makings of a Hollywood blockbuster, or some weird indie horror game. Strange location, small group of kids looking for adventure, a sudden disappearance, and a time limit before everything went back to normal. All it was missing was a monster, or a murderer, and it'd be ready for the screen. "Did you ever find Emma?" Winter asked, watching the girl as she stared at the ceiling for a while. "No," she coughed, and Winter sighed as something large and bulbous fell onto her chest. Winter leaned forward and scooped it into her palm, taking it to the sink so she could store it in a jar. That was a real letdown. Winter had hoped there would be more. They had never found Emma and had been forced to leave before the water came rushing in. Neat and tidy, wrapped up with a, but we did find something. Winter jumped, turning back to find the girl staring at the ceiling as she continued to regurgitate her story. We found the inhabitants of Fenders Grotto. "Emma!" I yelled, running back through the park as I looked for my friend. The plastic forest loomed up around me as I ran, the glistening, fabricated trees looking like phantoms in the moonlight. Even then, I could swear I was being followed. It wasn't something seen from the corner of my eye. Not yet, but it was just that crawling feeling of eyes on me. I put it aside, not ready to admit there could be someone else here. This place had been underwater up until about an hour ago, and the thought that anything could have been waiting here was crazy. Or was it? "Sara!" Candace and Matt came running up to me, their eyes roving around like they could feel something watching them too. "Don't just run off on your own. We've already lost Emma, and we don't want to lose you too. I don't understand where she could have gone. It was like she was there one minute and just gone the next." "Well," Matt said, "the best idea might be to go back and have a look around the house. That's the last place we saw her, so she couldn't have gone too far." That seemed like good advice, so we walked back to the fabricated house to see if we could find any trace of Emma. Emma had been one of my first close friends, and I really wanted to find her. She was so quiet and always seemed unsure of herself. I had taken it upon myself to protect her over the years. Now she was gone, and I felt like I had failed. I wanted to find her, to find who or what had taken her, and I knew that we had to be quick because the tide would be coming back soon. We went back to the lumpy-looking house, and I saw there was a door in the side of it, that half of it was missing. It was one of those doors where just the top half opens, and the bottom half must have been sealed shut. We pushed on it, but it didn't take me long to realize there were no hinges on it. I wanted to look inside in case she might be in there, and with the help of Matt and Candace, I managed to look over the tall lip of the door and see into the shadowy interior. The windows were fake, so there wasn't a lot of light coming into the strange building. It was empty on the inside, nothing but trash and discarded things that had been pushed in with the tide, but as I glanced to my left, my heart skipped a beat. Set into the wall was a giant metal something. It was all rusted steel, the wires exposed, and things were clinging to it like flesh or barnacles. As I started to scream and flounder, Matt and Candace hung on, asking what was wrong, and when the metal thing didn't swivel out immediately and try to grab me, I decided it must not be alive. I got control of myself. I looked at it a little more, really taking a good look this time as the moon came in through the open half of the door. "It looks like it might be an arm or something," I said, when they asked me what I had seen. "It was set into the wall, so I guess maybe it was meant to come out of the top part of the door? But why?" Candace was puzzled, but Matt had the answer almost immediately. "This must be Mama's house." The second he said it, I remembered. Mama, Fender's mama, was supposed to be the wise old matron who gave the puppets their daily task or wisdom. No one ever saw her. She was just a felt arm that came out of the door, and I suppose maybe they had tried to recreate it here. Can't imagine the sight of a huge disembodied arm would have been particularly nice, but I suppose for the fans of the show, Mama would have been there to talk to them and maybe tell them something about the forest. "Is Emma in there?" Candace asked. "No," I said, it's just a bunch of trash. I don't think there's a way she could have." But then something shadowy moved in the back of the house. It went galumphing along the back wall before slamming through another door and exiting Mama's house. I did fall then, landing on my butt on the wet cobbles, and when they asked me what I had seen, I wasn't sure what to tell them. I hadn't got a good look, but it looked like something big and blue that was slightly fluffy. "I don't know," I breathed as I got up, "but it went off towards the other side of the park. Maybe it took Emma. We should go after it." They agreed, though they didn't seem to like it. It had to be the people we had seen earlier. Nothing could be living here. It was underwater most of the time. Whatever the case, we decided that it was our only real lead, so we went after it. We ran around the back of Mama's house just in time to see something shadowy disappear into the woods around us. We chased it through the plastic trees, the blue thing looking lumpy and ill-proportioned in the moonlight. It was big, too, at least adult-sized, and as it broke free of the forest and went staggering towards the beach area, I saw a few other shapes standing on the shores of that washed-away water area. The sand on the beach looked more like hardpan now, time spent underwater having made it firm like concrete. I had seen pictures of it once. They used to have beach chairs, a lifeguard stand, and even a little boardwalk area where you could buy souvenirs and saltwater taffy and things. Most of that was gone now, but some of the boardwalk remained. That's where it was going, the big blue thing, and I saw others too. A small green one, an orange one with a bow, and a tall one whose color I couldn't make out. They turned to go before the blue thing could join them, and I thought maybe I saw someone with them. They were so big that it was hard to tell, but there could be a smaller form with them. Maybe. "We need to go after them," I said, taking a step forward. "We need to get out of here," Candace said. "There's 4 of them and 3 of us. We need to get the police. We need to..." "By the time we get back with the police," I yelled at her, they'll have already taken her." "Hell, by the time we get here, the water might have come back, and there'll be nothing for them to investigate. If we're going to save Emma, we have to do it ourselves." They had all disappeared, gone into the shadowy remnants of the once magnificent boardwalk. I knew they were doing something in there, robbing Emma or worse, and I knew that we were the only ones who could help her. I took a step onto the hard sand, and when the others came behind me, I was glad. I didn't think I'd have had the courage to go through with it if they weren't there. The boardwalk creaked under our feet as we looked for her. Parts of it threatened to break with every step, and I was worried that we would end up under the boardwalk soon. The storefronts were mostly shells, the husks of ice cream parlors, soda jerks, and gift shops. None of them could have hidden the 4 creatures, and it wasn't until I came to something that had to have been a gift shop that I figured we had found the place. It was still mostly intact, the windows gone and the shadows inside deep, and the door was broken open, the moonlight that spilled in decidedly unhealthy looking. And it was the last place I really wanted to go. Matt put a hand on my shoulder as I started to go in, shaking his head as he put a finger to his lips. "We can't just walk in there half-cocked," he whispered. "Let's sneak in and see what we can find. Maybe they're just holding her for ransom, or they left her here after they took her stuff. If we can get in and get out without being seen, then we can help Emma and get out of here." It was a sound plan, and so we started in through the front, keeping low so we wouldn't be seen. The inside was probably once eggshell white, but was now a kind of dusky gray. The shelves were mostly standing, rusted and metal and bolted to the ground. I can't imagine how they had lasted this long, but we were pretty glad for the protection that they gave us as we moved in between them, keeping low, keeping our heads down. And as we came to what would have been the front, we found something sitting against the counter. It was Emma's bag, and there was no sign of any of the things or Emma. Her bag being here made us think that she had to be close, though. So, they took her? Matt asked as he looked around. I don't know, I said, but we need to find her so we can get out of here. No, duh, Candace said. First we have to... There was a noise from behind the counter then. A low, gurgling noise that came bubbling up from the depths. It was unlike anything I had ever heard. It sounded like what I assume a drowning man's last breath sounds like. The sound of a creature who lives in the depths of the sea, coming up suddenly. We all turned as one towards the counter, as some snuffling horror rose from the darkness. It was blue, the body like a lumpy, overstuffed toy. The fur on it was matted and wet, the fabric weathered and holey. It looked like a bundle of wire hangers, the fabric pushing in odd ways as it stood up, and its dead eyes and frozen face were staring at us. It had large, wide eyes, the patterns scrubbed completely clean, and the smiling mouth was broken by small jags and blemishes from time spent below the water. But that honestly made it worse. It came smiling up from the darkness, those white, horrifying eyes piercing into us as we stood stock still. Candace broke the silence as she screamed. Her voice echoed off the walls, and the blue creature jumped over the counter as it buried her in a mountain of wet blue fabric. We should have done something. We should have helped her. We should have called the police or done anything to help her. Instead, Matt and I ran from the gift shop in a state of extreme panic. We continued to run up the boardwalk, the boards groaning as we put our full weight down on them. And when we finally got off and back onto the sidewalk, we were both panting heavily. I think, Matt said, panting, I think that was Corfin. Who? Corfin, the girl whispered, the name sounding like a curse. He was one of Fender's friends. There were 4 of them on the show, something I wouldn't learn till later. Corfin, large and blue and a little slow. Marigold, orange with a bow. She was basically a female Fender. Hopscotch, she said, shuddering visibly. Small and green and quick and terrifying. Fender, he was the worst. Red with big eyes like Corfin, a wide smile, and no mercy. The girl retched, and up came another of the memories. Dr. Winters hadn't been expecting this, and she scooped it off the girl's chest and took it to the sink. She dumped it in, watching it wobble there for a moment before realizing that the girl was talking again. We had to run. We couldn't do anything. We ran for the gate, but they were one step ahead of us. In the end, they were always one step ahead of us. We didn't know. Who? I asked, trying to keep pace with Matt's longer legs. Corfin. Remember, I told you guys that Mom had the plushie. I remember liking him as a kid, but now I'm kind of glad she got rid of it. I don't think I could stay in the house with that thing after this. We were running up the center lane, making our way for the main gate. We had to get out. We had to escape. It was the only way, but as we came into the collection of soppy storefronts, that's when I got that feeling of being watched again. It was even worse than it had been in the forest. The eyes of something were upon us as we made a break for it, and it made us careless. I kept stumbling over things like shells and the corpses of dead fish. It was hard not to feel them, harder still not to notice them. They peeked from the turnstiles of empty rides, from every haggard building that stood still, and once or twice I thought I caught a glimpse of something else as it tracked us. A flash of red, a flash of green, a flash of orange, a flash of blue. They were all after us, even Corfin, and we had to get away. We came back to the front, that long main street of derelict stores and muted colors, and that's when we saw it. It was in the road, barely bigger than me, and it was hopscotching across the board that had been drawn on the ground. Matt and I stopped, standing as still as we could, while it played, and it didn't seem to have seen us. It had its head down, its feet pumping as it jumped from one square to the next, and its eyes were centered on the game. I looked at Matt and found that he was looking at me. Neither of us seemed to know what to do, so we just stood there, hoping not to be noticed. That was when it looked up. It was small and green, the fur matted and clinging to it rottenly. It had the same washed-out white eyes, no hint of color, and as its mouth lolled open, I could see something darker inside, something that writhed and pitched like tar. The eyes inside that mouth were terrible, huge liquid orbs of hatred, and it stood poised on one foot, as if waiting for a signal. We didn't move. We didn't know what might set it off. We were listening for any sound around us, any indication that the others might be close by, and this might be nothing but a distraction. We stood staring at each other like gunfighters, waiting for the draw. And when it opened its mouth, it bellowed at us, and we knew it was more than a challenge. Hopscotch had signaled the others. "Run," I told Matt, and the two of us took off back the way we had come. Around us, I could hear something large moving through the abandoned storefront. I didn't dare turn my head. I didn't dare look to see what it could be, but up ahead a shape was beginning to materialize. It was about our size, its head lopsided. The fur around its mouth was all gone. The closer we got, the more I realized it was the park's namesake. It was red and slim, and it could only be Fender. I heard Hopscotch coming up behind us, and I could tell another was coming in to hem us off. We cut down an open space, the one that would take us to the fair, and that was when the big blue one rose up. He was massive, easily twice as large as the others, and I yelled at Matt to look out. Somehow, I'll never understand how, but we managed to get around him. He lunged at Matt, but seemed to second-guess it a moment later and lunged at me. He missed us both, and we didn't even turn to see if he was following us as we proceeded into the fair section of the park. If the rest of the park was in disrepair, then the fair was downright skeletal. The rides had not taken well to being submerged in salt water, and the ones that were left were hulks that had been chained to the ground. The bones of a Ferris wheel were here, but I could see that half of it was gone. One of the cars hung lonely from it, a single soldier, trying to hold out against time. Many of the food stalls had collapsed, the Canopies and banners were nothing but ragged memories, and the only thing that seemed even partially intact were the bumper cars. Some were gone, but the majority of it was still there. It would have made a great place to hide, I reflected, as we walked past it. This is nuts, Matt said, breathing. I never thought I would spend my evening getting chased through an abandoned theme park by creatures my mother had talked about so fondly. It's like being chased through Disneyland by Mickey freaking Mouse. How are there still creatures here to chase us? I asked, as I leaned against the side of the bumper cars and tried to catch my breath. The place has been underwater for 2 decades. There shouldn't be anything left. I don't know, Matt said, but we gotta find a way out of here. They're fast, and they seem pretty organized. They've already got Candace and Emma. I really don't want them to get us. It made me more than a little sad to realize that we had just stood by and let our friends get snatched, but what else could we do? We couldn't fight these things. We didn't have any guns or weapons. They were bigger than us, too. Well, the blue one was, and who knew what was actually under those suits and heads? I had glimpsed a little bit of it in Hopscotch, and I really didn't want to see any of it any closer. They were being used, that was obvious, and I assumed it was the reason that they had never tried to tear this place down. If those things were making it their home, I didn't want to get too close either. We got to find a way out of here, Matt reiterated, and I opened my mouth to say that I was aware when I heard a loud sound from behind us. We jumped the little fence and hid behind some of the bumper cars as they came into the fairground. None of them spoke, standing in a loose group as they stared vacantly ahead. Whatever was inside them was some kind of hive mind, I assumed, because without a single word spoken, they all suddenly took off in different directions, weaving through the streets of the old fairground as they searched for us. We stayed low, waiting for them to move away, and when Fender finally took his leave, I whispered to Matt that we should get going. We kept low, we kept quiet, and we made our way back in the direction of the front by way of the fence line. There has to be something, a hole in the wall, a way to get back to the entrance. Something, he said. I started to tell him that we could go looking for holes, but that was when I looked down and saw the water. It wasn't much, just a trickle, but it was definitely starting to come back in. How long had we been here? I didn't know, but it didn't feel like that long. It felt like we had barely been here an hour, but I guessed it really didn't matter. I didn't know how long we had searched for Emma anyway. However long we had been here, the water was going to come back soon, and we were going to be stuck in more ways than one when the tide came back in. This would definitely be water that was too deep to touch the bottom of, and I doubted that either one of us had the energy left to swim for what was probably nearly a mile. We got to find something, I told him. Let's check the wall and see if there's a hole. We made our way carefully through the fair area, hearing little noises that made me believe we were being followed. Why didn't they just get us already? They didn't seem to have any problem taking Emma or Candace. Were they playing with us? I didn't know. I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of here, away from this place, so I could never see any of this again. We searched, but the walls were surprisingly sturdy for a place that had been underwater and abandoned for 20 years or so. The walls were tall, the tops coated in razor wire that looked rusty and jagged. I didn't want to tangle with razor wire under the best of circumstances, and it looked like a quick trip to the emergency room for sure. Matt spit out a string of curses as we failed to find a way out, and I told him it might be best if we headed back for the front. While we were looking, the water had been slowly creeping up around our shoes, and I could feel the moisture sinking into my socks. And we were going to be waiting soon, That was a certainty, and I didn't want to try to run from those things with water coming up around my ankles.
Maybe we can get around them. They're clearly stalking us,
Matt said as he looked around worriedly.
So if they're here, then we can make a run for it. Then maybe we can get out before they can catch us.
It was a sound plan, and we made our way back along the wall as we headed for the front gate. Matt had wanted to run. Hell, I wanted to run, but I made him slow down so we didn't get winded. If we had to sprint, I didn't want one of us to trip from exhaustion and get caught because we were tired. We came back around to the ticket booth, and I smiled, thinking we were free. I think now that was what jinxed us, the thought that the worst was behind us. All the warning we got was a groan of metal and wood before Corfin landed on Matt and squashed him to the ground like a bug. They were all around us suddenly, Corfin standing on Matt's back, and the other three looming in the doorway of the old buildings like ghosts.
"Run!"
Matt shouted out, and again, all I could do was run. I ran back into the park because it was the only option I had. The water was starting to come in now, covering my shoes as it slowly trickled back into the park. I could think of only one place to go, and it was the last place I wanted to go. I ran for the giant mountain, the one with the face on it, the tallest point in the park. Dr. Winters sat in silence as the girl brought up two more of the fatty balls of memory. This was unprecedented. She had never seen someone bring up more than one of these at a time, and this girl, Sara, had brought up 4 so far. She started to go and collect them. She started to wake the girl up and tell her to stop, but she realized the futility of both very quickly. Dr. Winters could no more stem the tide of memories than she could stop the girl from telling the story. She needed the ending just as much as the girl did, and until she had it, she wouldn't feel right. "So you climbed the mountain then?" she asked, wincing as another one came bubbling up. The girl gurgled a little as she brought it up, panting as she tried to continue. "Yeah, I climbed it. That's when everything went to hell. I came to the base of the mountain, and it looked even bigger this close up. The foot of the mountain was nothing but rusty rails that had once fenced in the crowds and held the excited masses at bay. Now, they just looked pathetic and broken. Yet another obstacle for me to overcome so I could be safe. They led into a gaping tunnel that I felt sure would bring me into another waiting area, and then to a hunk of rusted track and cars, which had once been a roller coaster. I ran in, wanting only to climb to the top of the mountain before the water came rushing back up. It had been getting wetter the deeper into the park I ran, and as I walked into the mountain, the water was up to my ankles, and it was rising at an alarming rate. I was glad when the ramp began to take me higher, then up to a rickety metal platform. It was probably once industrial grading, but every step seemed like it might send me tumbling down. The rust flakes fell from it as I slowly ascended, and I gripped the handrail like it might provide some kind of protection if this thing came down. If it fell, the mascots my mother had loved so much would be the least of my worries. I'd be buried under all that metal and would likely never be found. I thought of fish nibbling on my crushed body, and it spurred me on. When I reached the top, I happily stepped over onto the rock surface of the mountain. It felt sturdy. The mountain was probably made of concrete or something that would stand the crash of the waves. I felt confident as I looked at the bones of the old roller coaster before me. The mountain face had been an impressive combination of wood and steel, but now it was a rickety thing that lived on only by the continued good cheer of some faceless god. I wasn't sure how I could get higher than this, but I knew I had to. I could hear the tide coming back in, and it wouldn't be long before this spot was underwater. I had taken my first shaky step onto the roller coaster track when the scaffolding groaned again. I looked down, expecting to see Corfin coming up, but it was Fenders' lithe red form that ran up the metal tiers. I don't think I had ever really paid attention to these things when they moved. I was too busy running for my life, but as it came up the stairs, I watched it. It moved autonomously, each leg and arm seeming to move in time and independently. As it climbed, it got down on all four of its fuzzy legs and crawled up the stairs, moving like some great furry spider as it chased me. I knew I should move. It would get me if I didn't start climbing, but it was so graceful, so mesmerizing, that it would have easily gotten me if luck hadn't saved my life. It was a single staircase away from reaching me, an easy climb when the scaffolding made an angry sound and suddenly cut loose from whatever was holding it up. It swerved, falling in a downpour of rust and metal, and Fender turned its colorless eyes up to me and made one last huge leap to reach me. He soared through the air, clearing the stairs and nearly landing on the ledge before slamming into the rock at waist level. He fell into the rubble below, his face a smiling deception of the fear that was likely going on behind the fluff. I heard when he landed, and it didn't sound healthy. He lay there, staring up cheerily as some black liquid spilled out of him, and I dragged my eyes away as the water began to pour into the lowest level. If the stairs had been treacherous, then the roller coaster rail was a death trap. They shifted, they crumbled beneath me before I could get more than a hand towards the next piece. Luckily, I managed to scamper onto the other section before I fell 50 or 60 feet into the rising water below me. It was getting deep, but I didn't think it would be deep enough to catch me if I were to fall. I had never felt like I might be in more danger of dying, not in my entire life, but I'd become numb to it after my evening in Fender's Grotto. If I died, then I'd join my friends in whatever hell this place kept us in. But if I survived, then I could tell their story and hopefully get them some justice. I was nearing the 90-foot mark, the top of the mountain still a dizzying height, when I looked down and saw them below me. Their poses would have been comical under different circumstances. They were leaned back, their spines nearly at a 90-degree angle, and those whited-out eyes were staring straight at me. Their mouths were open, and that's when I realized that those were the eyes they saw me with. They were standing in over 2 feet of water, the waves lapping at their chests, and I knew they would be covered in a matter of minutes. The levels were rising, and the tide was coming back in, but that was no assuredness of safety. They lived in the water, after all. What was to say that they couldn't swim? Would it not be easier to swim up here once the water got high enough? I tried not to think about it as I made my careful way up the roller coaster track. I was 120 feet up when I heard something groan under me. I looked down, expecting to see the track start to fall, but it wasn't the track that I needed to worry about. Fender had returned. His spider movements were less than precise now. He jittered, he twitched, and the black fluid seeped out of him as he climbed after me. Those smiling, lifeless eyes were on me, his fuzzy hands finding purchase, and I started climbing recklessly as he made progress. He wasn't afraid to fall. He'd be in the water if he fell, and that was where his friends were. That was the same reason I was afraid to fall, but he didn't need to know that. I was 200 feet up, the height making me dizzy, when I saw him come to my level on the track. We were 30 feet apart, nothing to him, and as he ran, I saw him open his mouth to reveal a tide of darkness inside him. Those red-rimmed eyes looked out at me, the edges bristling with teeth, and when the track screeched under him, I found the strength to backtrack and start running. I heard it give way, heard the rails fall into the water below, and I felt my ground begin to go with it. I had a second of free fall, my guts turning to water, before I threw myself at the other track with everything I had. I expected to feel it fall from under me. The whole thing was ready to rot through, but somehow it held as I shakily pulled myself up. I looked back, but he was gone. He must have fallen too, and I was alone on the track again. I saw the top of the mountain. It was another 30 feet up at least, but it was within reach. I knew I could make it. If I could get there, I could be safe. I knew this somehow, and as the water rose, I climbed. I remember seeing them before the water covered them. They were still standing there, just watching me climb, and it was chilling to see the water swallow them up. I still don't know what they were, and I don't care. I've come as far inland as I dare, as far as I can afford to live comfortably, so that I never have to worry about seeing their strange watery eyes again. The water covered them, but they never floated up like I'd been afraid they would. I pictured them swimming up to get me, but it never happened. Whatever they were, they stayed underwater, and that was fine with me. I didn't make it all the way to the top. The water caught me 20 feet from the peak, and it was a good thing it did. I was preparing to climb, getting myself ready to hang from the track as it made a loop, when a part of it fell out from beneath me. I fell again, but I hit the water a few seconds into the fall. It was right beneath me by then, and I floated over to the side of the edifice as the tide came spilling in again. I was eye to eye with one of those huge eyes on the mountain, and I didn't really care for it, so I moved around to the side and began to climb up the side of the mountain. It was treacherous. The sides were slick, but they were also pitted with erosion that made for good footholds. I scaled it, afraid that one of those furry monstrosities would suddenly grab me from beneath the water. And when I reached the top, I discovered that I had been right about how much it poked out of the tide line. It made a little island in the bay, and I sat there watching the lights of the town twinkle until the sun finally came up. I was rescued around noon. By then I was hot and thirsty and miserable. The Coast Guard had so many questions, and I answered them as best I could. Told them about what had happened to my friends, about the park, about the creatures that had tormented us, but I don't think they believed me. The police didn't seem to believe me either, but when my friends' parents started coming forward, they were forced to believe. What they did believe, it seemed, was that 3 high school kids had disappeared without a trace, and I heard the cops went in at low tide to search the park in force. After the 5th one also went missing, they stopped sending in search parties. The kids were gone. They never recovered a single body. My family moved not long afterward. The community had turned on us, thinking I was responsible for the deaths of my friends, and we left to start over somewhere else. I was plagued with night terrors as well, waking up every night to the screams of Fender and his friends, but the farther we got from the coast, the less the dreams came. When we landed in Kashmir, they stopped for a while. I went 5 years without thinking about Emma or Candace or Matt. I went half a decade without dreaming about those furry abominations. And then all of a sudden, I had the dream again last week. Then I had it again, and again, and again. I need them to stop. I need them to go back to being normal, because I'm afraid that if I keep dreaming about them, I'll bring them here somehow. She had rolled off the couch near the end, and the memories just kept coming up. It was like vomit from a drunk, and they hit the carpet with a meaty sound. She brought them all up, pushed them out, along with all the pain that had been connected to them. And as she lay there in a daze, Winter began to scoop them up. She had to get them out of sight before the girl woke up. If she saw them, it could jeopardize the results, and Pamela wanted the girl to be at peace. She had suffered enough, by God. She came to a few minutes later, after Winter laid her back on the couch and rubbed her chin as she asked what had happened. Winter told her that she had come in for treatment and that it had been successful. Whatever had been bothering her was gone, but if for some reason it ever came back, she should return immediately for a follow-up. She tried to keep her face placid, a mask of warm concern, but Winter honestly hoped the girl had gotten them all up. Sara left then, thanking her for whatever she had done, and Winter made a note to investigate this Fenders Grotto a little further. It left a tickle on the back of her neck, and she wanted to know why.